This is Dr. Armand Quintos, Technical Manager of Nezus Philippines Incorporated. Our next speaker is a Mexican national, and he has specialization in animal production and health science, and he has subspecialization in pharmaceutical product use in animals. In 1997, he earned his degree of Doctor of Veterinary Medicines and Zootechnics at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. In 2005, he earned his master's degree in animal production and health science, also at the same university. Currently, he is the Veterinary Technical Coordinator, the Science and Development Market of PAFA. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Shalaiko Christian Carlin Valderrabano.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank to the organizers for the opportunity to allow me to participate in this important event through the following topic: maximizing efficiency and profitability through safe feed additives. As an introduction, and in a general way, we can say that feed additives help us to achieve production goals, of which we can also see a production required of pig industry worldwide, an industry that strives year after year to cover the growing demand from its consumers. Also, the pandemics have caused a negative effect and a challenge in pig production. We see that greater production is required to cover the demands of its consumers. In this slide, for example, we can see through per capita consumption of the behavior that ASF and COVID-19 produced in the Philippines and China, and the Mexican case, which has still been saved from ASF, but not from a growing productive demand. Suffice it to say that in Mexico, we depend around 30% of pork imported from the US and Canada mainly. The demand for pork products is always a reality for each country, in which the effort of the national pork industry is required. Recalling the previous graphs, we can see that the demand for pork will not be covered by local production, so it is accompanied by the commercial pressure exerted by imported pork. It is an aggressive competition that always asks for products in excellent quality, whose clients do not know if the cost of production is at a disadvantage, if the laws have become stricter, or if the pressure of the certain fractions of society is technically or correctly justified, or if in some way there is a decrease in options that support animal production. In this semblance, we must bear in mind the universe of factors or challenges that our production faces in day-to-day work, which in addition to depending on good livestock practices, genetic advances in the pig, and animal health, much also depends on correct animal nutrition. We can highlight the role of animal feed and nutrition due to the cost that it represents in the pig company or farm, around 70% of expenses. In this way, and considering all mentioned, it is desired to have a feed additive that is safe, effective, and efficient. Of these last two terms, we must know their definitions, which are often confused. Briefly, we can say that efficacy led us to achieve the productive objective, for example, market weight, and efficiency tells us that resources, for example, time, money, feed, are used without waste, that is, obtaining the maximum benefit and ideally the best product with the minimum investment. With these definitions in mind, we understand that they are part of the definition of a feed additive, that added to the feed improves certain nutritional characteristics without necessarily being a necessary nutrient or nutritional element, but that its presence improves production and profitability under certain instructions or circumstances. In this universe of additives for animal feed, we find growth promoters, which in a popular way, the term has been coined to antibiotics used for many years for that purpose. Although it is very prudent and convenient for production to recognize that it is a term and definition that might well be used to another substances that promote growth. In a simple way, we could group the additives and promoters into the so-called natural and the synthetic ones. Without demerit for any, we must say that the natural ones are industrialized products, which in a certain way could bring them closer by the mere process to those of the synthetic type, in addition to the existence of products or options that can be natural or synthetic. Let us think, for example, in the vanilla, betaine, and the allicin extract of garlic. Which the pig farmer would prefer to choose for his pigs, the natural or the synthetic, the expensive or the cheap? Does he know or be sure of which one is buying? Which quality? The result is the same. I repeat, without the merit for the natural or the synthetic. You and your professional advisor or specialist, based on evidence, are the ones who decide on this or that additive as an effective and efficient productive option. It is worth mentioning that we can find different classifications of feed additives, such as the following that I quote from the book Nutraceuticals in Veterinary Medicine. Certainly, there are classifications for each country, institution, or author, all very understandable in the logic that in some way can be seen reflected in this image of the author. For each additive, we must be aware of its scope and limitations, its pros and cons. I will cite some examples and I will focus on one of particular interest in the world of pig production. Probiotics, live microorganisms with the capacity to beneficially colonize the gastrointestinal tract, for example, through competitive exclusion. Prebiotics, elements that are not digestible by the animal, which are digestible by the microorganisms that we identify as beneficial. We favor them so that they colonize and persevere. Symbiotics, a possible sum of the previous two. There is a diversity of products and strains of microorganisms, some spirulated like Bacillus subtilis, that are indicated for pelleting. In the case of prebiotics, there is a very wide knowledge with various publications for inulin from chicory. In Mexico, it has been testing agave inulin, or better say, agavin. There is a lot of information and a wide range of products, and I'll ensure results that are also diverse, not always statistically significant, but it is advisable to measure the respective performance considering what is best for each farm or business. Antibiotics. We know that their great use in the livestock industry, estimated around 70% of world production, occurs as treatment in individual cases, in collective cases, in metaphylaxis, and as growth promoters, with subtherapeutic doses or subdoses. FDA mentions that around 74% of veterinary antibiotics are prescribed via feed. Their proven performance as growth promoters is attributed to the reduction of microorganisms in the intestinal tract that competes for nutrients, in addition to the fact that in different developing countries, they continue to be a cheap tool, productively speaking, which in a certain way has encouraged their misuse or abuse, and is a logical reason for bacterial resistance in different degrees of severity. This means losing its effectiveness in animal production and a serious problem in human health, in addition to the fact that abuse can lead to losing food safety because of overpassing limits of antibiotic residues in products of animal origin. Additionally, antibiotics have been grown applied as a sort of solution for poor quality feed, but it is expected that in farms with better biosecurity, antibiotics could be quite less required. Discourage or even ban the use of antibiotics as promoters occur with some fear for pig farmers due to apparently not having options or substitute their productive effect and keep the expected economic benefit. Let me considering in some more detail the authorized beta agonists as growth promoters in feed for pig production. In general, there is a well-known agonist effect in growth promotion, but it is also important to know that not all beta agonists have the same chemical structure, so they cannot be assumed to have the same biological effect, nor do they all have the potential to growth promotion. In addition to this, the fact that there are differences in its effect depending on the type of animal species. So, it is worth mentioning that clenbuterol has been mistakenly taken as the general standard bearer of beta agonists, but it certainly has differences. Although it is growth-promoting effects in fattening cattle, its chemical structure gives it particular high tissue accumulation for several weeks or months, making it very dangerous compared to other beta agonists. Due to this situation and due to misuse or abuse of the drug, it is banned worldwide as a promoter, but it is still used in drug formulas for the treatment of respiratory diseases in animals and people because of its bronchodilator properties. Compared to this beta agonist banned for its documented toxic effect on people who eat beef with clenbuterol, there is a novel and very safe option in the pork industry, the ractopamine hydrochloride, whose chemical structure allows easy metabolization or degradation and quite low residues, or even none in muscle. I can say 2,000 times less than clenbuterol and around 100 times less than silpaterol. And that is why in more than 20 years of commercial use, has no reports of people who have suffered for consuming pork with ractopamine. This safety of ractopamine is an advantage for pig farmers because in addition to safety as a feed additive, it also offers efficacy in improving growth, increasing skeletal muscle mass and less fat tissue, improving efficiency, productivity, and quality of the pork. Ractopamine was discovered around 70s and its promoting effect in the 80s, 90s. The pioneer commercial product began its trade in 2000, spreading and replicating its benefits to many countries. The Codex Alimentarius establishes the maximum residual limits in 2012, 10 ppbs for muscle, skin, and fat, 40 ppbs for liver, 90 ppbs for kidney, which are adopted in favor of the food safety of people in many countries, such as the case of Mexico, Canada, and Japan. It is worth mentioning that the chemistry of the drug is well known. It is marketed in the form of a racemate that contains, in an almost balanced form, the 4 isomers that we can see in the image, of which the RR is the most biological active. Ractopamine is a well-known distribution agent or repartition agent. That is, it directs nutrients towards a greater generation and accumulation of muscle protein, reducing the amount of fat by also using it as an energy source. And with this brief explanation, is understandable the classification of homeoretic. Homeoresis is defined as a state of physiological control that orchestrates or coordinates the set of changes in the metabolism of body tissues that are necessary to support one physiological state or metabolic process over another. Examples of homeoresis are the individual's growth, the state of pregnancy, and the lactation. Certain recommendations for the use of any of the additives must be followed. And in the case of ractopamine, in many countries, the recommended period of use of the drug is around 4 weeks, without days of withdrawal, supported by the fact that from the last consumption of feed with ractopamine, in the following 8-12 hours, 60% of the drug has been eliminated, and at 24 hours, around 85%, which is very convenient considering the well-known logistics and shipping time for slaughtering pigs. It is very recommendable to ask to your local authorities for the doses and if there is a specific withdrawal time. It is worth mentioning that the result in hedonic comparisons of meats with ractopamine and without it does not offer a perceptible difference. This promoter effect is reversible, physiologically regulated. The receptors that capture ractopamine go down, so the presence of the drug only acts for a certain period, decreasing its potency towards week 6, adding the rapid metabolism due to its pharmacokinetics with an accumulation in tissues that, as we saw previously, tends to a fast decrease after 8-12 hours of the last consumption and towards nullity in pork. Reason why the absence of toxic events in pork consumers. What should also be known is that the drug is strictly regulated, taking care of its use and the residues in tissues. The level of strict requirements depends on each country and its government. There are also nutritional recommendations to consider, which are very important so that the homeoretic effect of ractopamine has sufficient resources to be distributed at the convenience of a better body performance of the pig. Without forgetting, homeoresis itself represents a period of some stress to the individual. It's recommendable to consult with your nutritionist or specialist. Now, let's see some more evidence that gives the security of the effect of ractopamine. This study was carried out in Mexico in 1995, and interestingly, we appreciate the effect of ractopamine using 2 sources of energy, vegetable oil and animal fat. The author confirms in Mexico what other international works have also reported for ractopamine regarding the productive improvement of the promotion of growth and carcass yield. Another previous work compared the effect in males and females, disclosing data on the different responses between sexes, in addition to highlighting the efficiency of ractopamine because, in addition to its promoting effect, the target weight is achieved in fewer days with what this implies. That is, savings in resources, for example, feed, labor time, water, productive spaces, and energy. It seems that this type of action and the benefits of ractopamine could make sense with the concept of One Health. In this way, with the expected action of ractopamine, more research was carried out, compared doses and nutritional strategies to show the best results in finishing pigs and its carcasses. In this graph and meta-analysis, the promoting effect of ractopamine is a statistical regularity, improving weight gain, consumption, and feed efficiency. The same meta-analysis shows the better weight on the carcass and its yield, less fat, and greater development of muscle area with more commercial value. With some more recent works that confirm the benefits of ractopamine, they also remind us that there is a physiological regulation mechanism. Taking special note of this meta-analysis, it is interesting that the 10 ppm dose, that is commercially most frequently used, corresponds to a higher production of muscle and percentage of lean, as well as an expected decrease in fat. With this meta-analysis, we observe that an excessive dose not benefit peak production. Similarly, with longer time of use, as we saw. Therefore, it is essential to follow the product instructions and check it out with the nutritionist or specialist. Remembering that stress is an important issue, I must mention another work with ractopamine about this topic. Interestingly, some opinions refer that coincidentally, since the commercial use of ractopamine, more attention was paid to the stress during the handling operations of the pig and at the end of fattening and at its shipment to slaughter. This review is extremely interesting. Of a total of 50,244 pigs grouped in doses from 0 ppm without ractopamine to 10 ppm, it is observed that the last line that there is no big differences in the mortality. Very gratifying for those pig farmers and countries that plausibly use ractopamine. This other table from the same review shows that the greatest cause of stress in the movement of the pig is the handling practices. So, if the personnel were trained for more kind treatment to the pig, for example, in this case, less use of the electric prod, then there will be the expected fewer pigs injured or killed, fewer losses. In this other table, we can see, in addition to the electric prod, added situations to the stress, the distances traveled and the duration of the events, which both affect the stress results measured through the mortality and injured pigs. About the differences, we can note that the Southeast region, with less stress results, occupied for the total operation 462 minutes, meaning 7.7 hours, where 65% was in the average, while the Midwest occupied 386 minutes, meaning 6.4 hours, 27% in the average. They were faster, but less efficient. No production wants its animals stressed, and this includes production with ractopamine. Stress leads to an unnecessary waste of energy that is the enemy of the efficiency in the good farm practice that wants to offer a good quality product. One last comment regarding ractopamine as a safe feed additive in animal feed will be that some countries are missing out on this highly productive tool due to the bad publicity about the drug. The scientific community could carry out more research on the topic of residues to increase the strictness of regulation. But it is true and should be seriously considered that in more than 20 years of use in developed countries like Japan, Canada, and others like Mexico, there is no evidence of toxicity in people who have consumed pork with ractopamine. The productive effect, in addition to being safe, happens in a certain and relatively short time, facilitating its traceability. We can imagine that if a strong country like China were to add to a well-regulated and strict use of this feed additive, it would mean having around 10% more of its national pork, which adds to its incredible and highly commendable productive recovery despite the pandemics. To end this talk, I share a few notes for your consideration. There are experts for each additive, as well as confident vendors. You must conscientiously choose and, if possible, make use of the scientific evidence whenever it exists. Some additives have their main activity on the feed. For example, organic acids as feed conservatives. And feed biosafety is always crucial to keep good health. Do not underestimate the microbiological quality of your feed, and remember not to waste antibiotics on this. Those additives that benefit intestinal health should be given the opportunity to measurements in that way, the health. Not all the benefits is reflected in the promotion of growth. Ideally, a feed additive or a growth promoter should be a product with statistical support, with significant differences in favor of pig production. Now, let me quote Dr. Gonzalo del Villar, a well-known nutritionist in Mexico. There is not yet found a comparable alternative to ractopamine, with its proven benefits and its record in terms of food safety. If you have somewhat negative opinion of this feed additive or growth promoter, give yourselves and your pig business the opportunity to use it under professional assistance. As I mentioned, every additive requires serious attention on its instructions for use and preferably with the support of a specialist or nutritionist. Even when we make combinations that seem simple to us, consider the opinion of the specialists and scientists. They want to help us to improve the pig production. Let's avoid abuse, misuse, or overuse the additives to avoid their consequences and to use them as a allowed tool for our farm and business. We could say that if there are safe feed additives that offer proven efficiency and profitability, pig producers will be easily encouraged to change their farm practices, for example, on antibiotics, to keep them as efficacious treatments and avoid generating resistant microorganisms. Thank you very much for your attention and time.